Welcome back to Mystical Sisterhood. This is your host, Maureen Spielman, and today I sit down with Zeenath Ansari Selvakumar. And I've known Zeenath, I guess, for about 3.5 years now. We met in Dr. Shefali's Conscious Parenting Institute. And as synchronicity, I don't like to call it luck, really, but a synchronous experience, Zeenath and I were put into a group of women who were all in the central time zone. So we were in the central time zone and we became, our own group and really our own collective of souls that was probably destined to be together in this lifetime. It took us many years to get here, but Zeenath and I share a circle with 4 other beautiful women. And Tanu Betty is one who I've had on the podcast talking about all things compassion. Nani Langenstein has been here talking about consciously parenting your adult children. I still have to hook in the other two to come speak. But today I sit with Zeenath because Zeenath is always a font of wisdom, I would say, a practitioner of principles of what I'll just call a higher consciousness. And I don't say that in a way that it's something that's, beyond us and far away from us, but it's a concept that's there for us every day to feel into, to practice into, to become curious about, so much more. So Zeenath, welcome to Mystical Sisterhood today.
Thank you so much, Maureen. I am so excited to be here today and have this conversation. Finally, we have been talking about it for a while and it's finally happening. So everything has been aligned and, we're here now in this space and in the moment. So I'm looking forward to sharing some conversation with you and allowing this to just flow as it will.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I'll just say, Zeenath, a little bit about your background for the listener. It is that you do work a full-time corporate job, and on the side, you are a yoga instructor and you give your time weekly to an entity called Hope Farms in Houston, Texas. And then you're a breathwork practitioner. So I think this conversation is going to be really fun even for me today, because for some of the questions I ask, it's not the things I ask you on a daily basis. But so I see you and I experience you as a woman who is juggling and wearing many different hats. You're the parent to an upper teen and an early 20-year-old and married. You've got a full-time job. You have these side passions. You're raising your children. Wow. And I'll say too, your business is called My Z Energy. And so we can talk about that a little bit today. But I guess my first question, not how do you do it all, is what drew you to, I think, living in a higher consciousness or from a more soul perspective where you were really interested in an aligned life?
I don't know if I can pinpoint a time in space, but what drew me, is a feeling that I had. I mean, I always felt like I was drawn to talking out loud. When I was very young, I spoke out loud to myself. I would look in the mirror and I would name, it was like I had my own therapist. It was my reflection. It was really amazing thinking back now to that. But when I was very young, we had a big mirror on top of this couch, above this couch. And I climb on the couch and I look myself in the eye and tell myself that it'll be okay, whatever was going on, right? So, and I wasn't calling myself my reflection, Zeenath. I was calling my reflection the name Jamie. And I would say, Jamie, you're doing a great job, or how are you today? And it was, I don't know, it was like maybe that's when the soul searching started, because I was looking at my own pupil, my own eye, and my reflection and talking to myself in a way. So that was kind of my first memory of like now, like then it was normal for me to just go to the mirror and talk to Jamie, but
yeah,
now it's like, oh, maybe I was really in touch with that. I don't know. Maybe I was 7 years old or 6. I don't even know how old I was at that time. I remember.
Wow.
And then, I started studying in my 20s. I started studying a lot about meditation, yoga, different movement with the body work, and really being in the body and feeling what is going on in your body. And I think that started a lot of ignited a lot of questions. I studied feng shui, energy in the room. I studied taekwondo, tai chi, yoga, all of that. And I really discovered that there was so much more than that I wanted to know, right? And so I
That's so
think that
beautiful.
that,
Yeah.
bre- that brought it up for me.
Well, I love the two things that you just shared because when you talked about, it's kind of funny, this childhood memory and experience that you had, like when I envision you, when I can see you standing in front of that mirror and speaking to yourself, that was a practice of connection. And I love that as the first thing you mentioned because, when we're talking, you and I are both women at midlife. I think I've been using that term midlife a lot, but it was always called middle age. Whatever we call it, it is the middle of our lives. We have a lot of experience behind us and we have a lot to come. And so it's like I see it as a time of a women's awakening, but also a perfect time to continue practices that we've started or perhaps begin to cultivate. It's a perfect time because there's so much life in front of us and we have our lived experience, but you're starting out with like I looked at myself in the mirror. It was a practice of connection. So maybe that will be sort of our theme today. But I'm wondering too, like when I reflect on you discovering like, oh, having all these curiosities in your 20s, was there anything in your background or your cultural upbringing that led you to have more knowing of I think like alternative ways of looking at things? Or do you think it was just something inside of you that was guiding you to that? Maybe you needed it at that time. Mm-hmm.
Right. I believe it
Yeah.
was internal for me. It was some guidance internally for me. Externally, I had a lot of religious beliefs, cultural beliefs, systems, in the family growing up, and which was fun. I mean, it allowed me to tap into that spirituality in that way
Mm-hmm.
for what
Mm-hmm.
it was. But I think the guidance for me came from within. I
Yeah.
really didn't have meditation or anything, I mean, prayer was there when I was growing up. We prayed,
Mm-hmm.
but which is it can be a form of meditation because you go internally and you're in the moment. Hopefully when you pray, I mean, that's what I've learned. But so I think internally is where it came from. It was this drive or this passion that I had, a longing for from the inside out, right? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. In high school, I remembered people would come to me and they would want to talk to me about a lot of their issues. And I found comfort in helping comforting people too, And so I
Uh,
think that kind of emerged too as I was in my teenage years.
Yeah,
And
I love that. I love that. You know how you were saying like, oh, I was interested in feng shui, I was interested in meditation and all those things. It reminds me of like almost the things we seek are the things we are needing. That's the wrong word, but to cultivate, desiring to cultivate on a very like subconscious level, right? Because you remember the teaching when we were with Dr. Shafali and she would say, sometimes it comes as envy, but if there's something that you're really attracted to in someone else and you think you don't have, it's because you haven't recognized it in yourself yet. And I think that that's just a beautiful teaching that I continue to believe in. And I share that perspective with people when they might mention, oh, there's something that she has. Let's just use women that she has that I don't have. And it's just an untapped part of yourself. But it reminds me too of you were attracted to these things that perhaps on that inner level for your growth and transformation, you were really wanting and desiring at that time to. And we don't do these things all the time consciously, right? We don't know why we're doing them. But yeah, so any thoughts with
it's that
that?
little spark that each of us has, right? You get this little
Mm-hmm.
spark interest on something and you're like, do I ignore the
Yeah.
spark and just go with what I've been taught that this is the way I should, this is what I should know, this is how I should do things, this is how I should think?
Mm-hmm.
Or should I pay attention to that spark and go that way and find, just understand a different way and see if it does give you joy and allow you to be closer to your truest self.
I love that. And you also mentioned tapping into feelings, like how you were feeling as guidance. So you've mentioned how you were feeling. I really want, the listener to, I feel like this conversation today is just my intention would be just speaking to our hearts as the collective of women too, and what is there for us. So, what does it spark inside you? It kind of goes along with what you're saying about like, how does it make you feel? And what would you say about like, how can we use feelings as guidance, as a barometer for where we might be being directed in our lives?
I believe really tapping into your own body and asking yourself what you need every night before you go to sleep and every morning when you wake up. I think making that a habit is so important, asking your body and listening to what's going on. If you go inward to understand what's happening in your body or in your gut or in your mind, whatever it is, whatever you're thinking about, you are taking care of yourself first and foremost, and then you can take care of everything else. But so many of us, and it's so hard to do, right? Like you said, we're midlife. We have so much going on in our lives. We've got children that are becoming adults. We have parents that are elderly and need care. So we've got these generations that we're sandwiched in, right? One above, one below. We have some of these things that we are, our brain, we're going everywhere. Very different than when we were young parents and we're worried about our careers or what we're going to do, or parenting our young children, conscious parenting our young children now. There's so much that can go on in our thoughts and our mind. And when we go to sleep, that's our time to rest and really focus back into your body, to our own bodies. And how do I do that? I do that with breathing and meditation before sleep. I really try to cocoon myself away from anything that can make my mind wander. And it's okay if my mind wanders, by the way. I just practice. This is what practice is, right? Practicing meditation. Some days will be worse than others, but getting into the body, I feel like if I can hear my own heartbeat, I'm there. So I put earplugs in. They're called Happy Ears. I love them. They don't know about me. Like, I'm not endorsing that. I'm telling you about it, but they don't pay me. But I told so many people about it, they ought to pay me. But they're little plugs in my ears, and I push them in, and they stay in the whole night. And I wear an eye mask. And I didn't do this when I was a mother of elementary and toddlers, middle school, because I wanted, as I think I'm speaking for many women, I wanted to be aware. Even when you're sleeping, we are aware as mothers, right? I wanted to be aware of my surroundings. And gosh, if the baby cries, I need to hear it. Or if, a burglar comes in the house, I need to hear it. Or, whatever it is, I was sleeping with the outside, with my mind on the outer world, right? And so now, and I don't know if I could have put in the earplugs and the eye mask when the kids were young. I don't know. Now, in midlife, I have the opportunity to do it. I put on my gear. My husband can snore all he wants. I'm not going to blame him. I'm not going to be, make him feel guilty. I'm not going to do that. I've done that. I'm going to go into my own world and take care of myself. How can I take care of myself? Well, if our spouses, if we both snore and we take care of ourselves in that way, we can isolate ourselves. And when I do that, I hear my own breath and I meditate and I can hear my heart beating. I can actually hear my heart beating. And the other day I was reading a book I can't even remember which book it was, but I tend to open a book and read and then put a bookmark in, open another book. I know we all do that. We share that. And so, I was reading this book and it was talking about how when we hear our own heartbeats, it takes us back to the womb of our mothers.
Yes.
And that calmness that you have, that's all you have. It's like you're there.
Wow.
And you can hear your mother's breathing. You can hear your mother's heartbeat. And it takes you to that secure place before we get to the outer world. And so that's what I feel like before I go to sleep, where I go. I love it. And I wake up in the morning and I have gratitude. I again close I know that the sun's rising. I don't set an alarm or anything. My body does all the work for me, like waking me up. And as a woman in this glorious midlife, right? Halfway, we've lived halfway here, and hopefully we will live another, 50 years, 50, 55, 60, whatever happens.
Yeah.
But, I really feel like that has helped. That can help. I believe as you practice that, and because your mind is on your heartbeat or your mind is on your breath, your mind can't be on two things at one time. So when you do that, you're not sleeping with anxiety or lists or what happened or what's going to happen or all of the things, right? So
I love that so much, Zeenath. So many things you're sharing. And what I'm thinking is you could write a blog or you could read it in some sort of article. Oh, do these things. But why I love conscious conversations so much is that someone listening to this today can really get the essence of what it feels like, because even when you shared, like, as women at midlife, we can have all these different, and the one that was not named there was our bodies changing, going through menopause, and which is this complete body experience. And we can talk about that a little bit. But what really strikes me is that it is a time, it is this invitation we have to cocoon. I love that you use the word cocoon, to go inward. It almost feels like to luxuriate, to like these really the qualities of abundance around this. I am worthy. I am deserving. I am deserving to rest. I not only need to rest, I'm deserving of it. And so the outer world is very real. I know that you're caring for your father, your mother. I've lost my parents. So there's the gap of what I knew in whatever form it was. My children are going off. They still have big needs. And then we didn't even name having the full-time job and juggling that, but like just this call, it's a time inviting us inward. And, it's interesting. When I used to sit, Susan Lucci was on an early podcast. It was called Celebrating Circles and Purpose Work. And I remember I sat with Sue in circles very early on when I started my journey around probably late 30s. And I remember she would do a day or two classes on the crone and the aging woman of wisdom. But the crone was always, if you remember, like maybe on the cards, like a tarot card, she was always hunched over with almost like, like long hair and robes, and kind of had that persona. But I think that I've had several guests I remember Shiva Rose talked about in Asian cultures that it's called this, maybe it was Japan, it was called the second spring. And these beautiful new ways that we can talk about what's the changes we're going through on so many levels, and most importantly, on the inner level. But I just love the conversation, because if for any woman listening going through this, it's essential to have this conversation.
I think so, because, you can feel so alone as a woman. You're running around. You don't have time to talk to someone about your feelings, perhaps. You're running around. You're trying to take care of other people's feelings the whole time. You're asking people what they need. You're anticipating what they need. There's so much of that. And so I agree. Like, I feel like, every time you ask someone else what they need, I hope you're asking yourself what you need. The same,
that's good.
The same, same day, the same moment, what do you need, Maureen? And then I think what do I need, and so it can be a balance like that, and it's okay. And I think women, that's what women need in this world, is they need other women. They need sisterhood. They need to know that they're not the only ones. They're not. And that is so important, because that sisterhood and understanding each other at that level is like, okay, I'm not alone. I can share what my day was like, and they will understand and have compassion for me. And at the same time, as they're having compassion for me, they're also having compassion for themselves, because they're sharing the same experience. And so talking about it and having that circle is so important, as we do, from how we met, Central Time Zone, right, in the Shefali Institute. And, we have a special understanding that when we come to the table, and we have a weekly call, whenever we come to the table and we speak about our own, what's going on in our own world at that moment, it touches on all of us, one of us, two of us, whatever it is, but we help each other in that way, just by talking about our own, what's going on in our own experiences that week or that day, or, you know, with an aging parent, or with a teenager, or, you know, with work, or with ourselves, friends, relationships. It's all connected, you know?
Yeah.
If we let it, and that's the key.
If we let it. I love that, because, you know, I used the two words, higher consciousness, in the beginning. And as soon as I said it, I was like, whoa, that's kind of big, Maureen. But I want to break that down a little bit. And I think what I mean by that is that experiencing ourselves from not only our human perspective and our conditioned perspective, but beginning to know ourselves on this deeper level, where we do realize we're a spirit or a soul having a human experience. But, you know, even when we met, let's say in the fall of 2020, when we entered Dr. Shefala's, and for the listener who doesn't know, it's Dr. Shefali Sabari, and she's written many parenting books. She has a Conscious Parenting Institute and a wonderful book about women's awakening called A Radical Awakening. But I think, like, if we look back and think, where did we begin on this path of knowing ourselves more deeply? I don't know what comes to your mind, but one of the things that comes to my mind is when you expose yourself to conversations that are talking about, who am I? What's my purpose here? How am I showing up? Oh, your awareness begins to increase. I would say one of the first things for me is, what patterns am I showing up in? How kind of is my human self showing up? Am I defensive? Am I overly frustrated? Do I feel resentful? Like, and those were all the places I was and was in my, like, just system at that time, that I knew I had, but I didn't have a way to work with them yet, despite having been in therapy for many years. And so, but I think, like, for me, it's the awareness of, like, oh, I've had this relationship conflict for a long time. Oh, I've been body shaming for a long time. Oh, I do have a fear of aging. Oh, you know, I have fears around, like, my children and all the things. And it's just like, it was a beginning witnessing of myself, I think. And so, how about you?
Oh, I agree. I feel like sometimes I do something and I'm like, okay, that's not what I would normally do. Let me check in with my body. What's going on? Am I stressed about something? Am I anxious about something? Often after I do something that maybe I would have done 20 years ago, you know, and the other day I raised my voice I was talking to my husband and I raised my voice and I was like, what is going on with me? Something's happening, right? Now, lately I've been thinking it's all about hormones, you know, like that's like my go-to. Oh, it's the hormones, you know, but it's a check-in and it's kind of viewing yourself in that moment when you do feel, again, out of your body. Like, I don't typically scream, like that is not, or, you know, raise my voice. I don't like to be talked to in that way. And I don't like to raise my voice, but I did at this moment. And it was just one sentence. And I said something really loud because I felt like he wasn't listening. Yeah. And I always tell him not to raise his voice because I am listening. And I was like, okay, and he reminded me of that. He's like, Zeenath, you know, and you remind me of not raising my voice. And now you're, you know, so it was having the next step, like not just me raising my voice and that's it. And we don't talk about it. We don't say anything anymore about it. We go on and then it builds up and builds up and it builds up and it builds up, right? And that's when things occur in our bodies and we break down. And so the fact that he came to me, like we have a pretty open relationship and talk after these things happen. We used to not. We used to go to our separate, you know, we'd have our little tiff. And then we go our separate way and we would never mention it again. And that built up over the years. And of course, the conscious parenting and all the work that I feel like I have done and he has done to help me continue on the path, and he's interested as well. He is able to come to the table now as well. And I think, again, when I took care of myself and doing the work, he witnessed that, and then he started to understand some of the language and the communication and all that, we
I
do.
love that. I love that. Yeah.
But Maureen, you're right. Like, I mean, it is so hard to, have that alertness and awareness, self-awareness of what's happening every moment that you are. Like, it could be you're driving down the street and someone cuts you off. How do you react? You can call that person names and yell and and get your blood pressure high. I do this a lot, and it's a mind shift, because I probably would have be like, oh, that jerk just cut me off, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, oh, maybe they're running to the hospital. I switched the whole narrative in my mind. And it's helpful for me because, it's all about judgment. I mean, we're judging the person who's driving, right? And I try to lift that judgment and have a different dialogue in my head about situations in general. That's just
yeah. And I really appreciate that sharing around your relationship with your husband and just how you practice. And it comes to mind to me too, just the lens of compassion. And you used that word a little bit ago, but that lens of compassion that's so valuable for us as women, because, women across time have been shamed for the way we feel. We've been judged for the way we dress, whether we choose to work or not work outside the home. The list is long. And so as we go inward and as we kind of have an intention my intention is, well, how do I feel about this? And what does this mean to me? And how do I want to dress? And how do I want to express myself? And do I want to carry on the patterns of resentment and deep lack of intimacy I saw within my own parents' relationship? It's an awareness, and it's an awareness with compassion, like us all being in process, both generationally, but, like in process, like if I think of my grandparents, then to my parents, then to where I am now. And it's not a perfection gig at all, is it? It is patience with the process. And it's not about the outcome. It's about the process. And I know, and the listener knows this, we don't even have to say that we're not about perfection, but we have our challenges, because we all do. And if we can hold ourselves in that cocoon space of like, you're okay, you've got this, keep on reaching to the things that make you feel good, the things that make you feel very nurtured and nourished. And you're doing it. Appreciate yourself, acknowledge yourself. We're all on a path, and that path is it's not linear, number one, and it's not always easy, number two. But when we're committed to, being seekers, surrounding ourselves with beautiful messages, we are doing the work of that inner transformation.
And generations that you're speaking of, it is a way to show our children how we can take care of ourselves and take care of others. And if our children continue to see us, with our hairs frazzled and, running around, and we're not taking some moments for ourselves, our children can adopt that as we might have.
Yes. Yeah.
From our great grandfather, who knows, or grandmother, grandmother, if we're talking about women. But, I think the time is now. The time is now. You're right. The listeners know. I mean, we know. It's not we cannot be perfect. This is not a perfect world, but we practice to respond in a different way than our past ancestors responded. And to hopefully show and model for our children, our adult children, our tiny children, wherever we are, wherever they are, they're watching. They continue to watch. And so that's so important. I'm glad you brought in the generational, because that is key too. That's the way that we help. That's the way that we help our kids. You know?
And so if we could create a mantra or create, the direction we're moving in, I mean, what comes to mind for me is I am so deeply curious about my own process. And it is true that at one point in time, women, they wouldn't allow themselves to say that because it seems egoic. It seems self aggrandizing. It seems like, who do you think you are? But I think it's also true that when we are able to voice these ideas and this just radical commitment to ourselves, it gives the next person permission to do so. And we've been conditioned to be so afraid of shining that we must understand, like, oh no, now is my time. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to shine. So I don't know. Do you have thoughts about that?
Oh, no, I agree. We are all little stars wanting to shine. Our lights are igniting inside us if we let them, let our
Yeah.
lights ignite, right? And
Yeah.
it's just, it is beautiful when it happens and you feel a space where you do feel settled, even in the eye of the storm, right? There's a
Yeah.
storm, and the eye of the storm is actually very calm, like a tornado. Well, we can talk about tornadoes
Ooh.
because
Yeah.
have been hitting down like all over
Mhm.
the place lately. But tornadoes, it's just all this stuff going on. That can be our lives, right? All generations. And when you're in the center and the eye of that storm,
Mm.
it's very calm actually. And that's kind of the visual that is really helpful to explore and to strive to have the intention to be that calmness within that storm.
Mm.
And
Mm.
when you do that, it just can make it so much easier to deal with the storm, to
Yeah.
deal with each
Uh,
thing flying around, right? So it's hard. I used to be very codependent. I was in a previous marriage and I learned so much about myself because I was that outside of the storm. Like I was there, like trying to
yeah.
take care of everything, codependent. Like if they do this, I'll do this. Very, very codependent. And I learned so much. And talking about, you said the word selfish, talking about like, you go, I think you said the word selfish, or I thought it when you said another word. But when you go to that place, when you're like taking care of yourself, it can be vastly different from what you know. And it
Yeah.
can be very fearful and scary.
Yeah.
But to stay the path and have this sisterhood and know that you can talk to someone about, I, for so long, thought I was being selfish, take care of myself. All I knew was this outside world. And when in our culture you don't get a divorce, when I asked for divorce, that was a whole nother thing, right? Like it was like, really, am I being selfish by asking for a divorce? Do I deserve a divorce? Like, and deserve a divorce is something that, that language is like, yes, some people do deserve a divorce and want to be congratulated after a divorce.
Yeah.
Not I'm sorry it didn't work out. No,
Right.
it was a discovery for me, and it
Yeah.
worked out. And I'm a different person and I worked on it,
Yeah.
and I think that's the key is like to have the courage and know that it's going to be hard.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be harder dealing with the tornado and not being in the
Ah.
calm your whole life. It's going to
Yeah.
be harder that way than doing,
Yeah.
little by little, really trying to center into that calmness as much
Right.
as you can during the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
The practice is, and then it will be easier and easier, and your life will be easier.
Yeah, that's so good. I love so much of what you're saying, the analogy of the eye of the storm and that peaceful center to it. I love that because I think that you are not the storm, and we over identify that we are the storm. We are the emotion. We are, and no, it's what's happening either within you or on the outside of you, but that we are not that. And I think so many of us have been both codependent without realizing it and also enmeshed in the outer world. So this is why this work is so important too, because the more that we bring it back to ourselves, the less we are enmeshed, and we can see ourselves as a separate sovereign being. And what I thought about that, I had an internal question come to me, is that, well, okay, Maureen, if you're so fiercely saying like, we're all sovereign beings, again, there's conditioning in there because it's like, well, then that creates separation, but that's not true. It's that when we cultivate that, what I'm going to call like a oneness relationship with ourselves, we are more apt to become one with the world around us. So there's all these like, right, like gradations and the understandings that even when I'm in a conversation like this, I'm like, oh, I have a realization. I mean, that's the two different directions right there. But again, setting my own intention, and I invite the listener, like, oh, when you listen to this, what's the intention for yourself? To deeply know yourself, to cultivate practices, to see where you might be overly enmeshed with someone else's drama and how you're separate from it, and these beautiful concepts.
Yes, I agree. I think that's the first step, to explore how you feel in situations, in conversations with different people in your life, and how you
Mm-hmm.
feel in those situations, and explore other opportunities that will bring your light out and that sovereign being that you are. Because if each of us, think of what a world we would have if each of us were sovereign beings and really
Mm-hmm.
connected to our inner
Mm-hmm.
self, not had ego, no codependent, no drama, no enmeshment, like you said. I mean, all of it, it would be a different world for sure. So we
Yeah.
start with
Yeah.
ourselves. All we can
Yeah.
do is start with ourselves.
Yeah.
And when we take care of ourselves, I can be very like I really do feel like the world could change if we did that, and one by one,
Mm-hmm.
if we could do that,
Mm-hmm.
that would be
Yeah.
really great.
And I appreciate all that. And just this idea of, if you're a listener today, and I've got so many ideas about it, about gathering women, about, I think like this week for me is if we even pay attention to the signs and the synchronicities. And, I'll say a process that I've been going through is this week was episode 75 for the podcast. And I know and appreciate how fun it's been, how much work it's been. And sometimes still, I think, and what is it you're creating here? And what is this? And there's an outside voice that can say, you should know by now. And then this week, just being surrounded with conversations about community, about coming together. And then it's just coming to me more clear and clear that this is the call. And so I think it's so exciting because women are stepping into a newer paradigm, a newer energy, a newer vibration. And I do believe that we're doing it as a collective as well. And it's our responsibility. I hear you, and a lot of what you share is I'm not going to blame others any longer for the situations I find myself in. How can I take responsibility? How can I change my experience? Do you feel like that's part of your work?
I do. The blame that you have for others, I think, is a self reflection. Like, it is an opportunity to definitely look within and
Mhm.
see, what's happening. Take responsibility. Let's figure out what we need to do,
Yeah. Mm.
to make a change. I mean, that's
Yeah.
it. Pretty much the message, that I feel when the blame is there. It is co-created.
Yeah.
You are blaming someone for something that's in your world,
Hmm.
and you have a choice to do something differently
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
self-reflect. And so, yeah, I agree. I agree.
Right. Exactly.
We're just trying to understand who we are, and I know you're there for me as well.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's so beautiful. As we circle towards the end here, is there anything else that's on your mind or any message that you feel you still want to leave with the listener?
I feel that it can be very scary to change your ways, to change how you react, but it's possible. And
Mm.
with the right tools, with your own being, changes can happen, even if it starts with a walk by yourself with no
Hmm.
headphones on in
Yes.
nature every morning or every evening or both, or chatting with a friend who can compassionately be there, a sister, or, going back to your breath and your body and your
Yeah.
heartbeat, and just really reconnecting with that, because your body knows and your body will tell you.
Yeah.
And that listening, that will help every woman in our mystical sisterhood circle here, all
Yeah.
the listeners, help anybody. You don't have to be a woman, but we're starting there because we
Yeah.
are so much part of keeping everything together in society,
Yeah.
culturally, And
Yes.
so that's my hope, is that people will take just one step, and
Yeah.
after that, maybe another step,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
explore to understand what brings them joy and what can bring them back to their heart center, and
Yeah.
back to who they are.
I love it. It's all such deep wisdom. And I want to say, as we, I want you to share where people can find you, but this is the nature of the coaching that both you and I do. And I think, the many principles that we just peppered throughout today's conversation, they were very plentiful. They were very abundant. And this is the work. It's to look at all of these things in just this really just beautiful container that are there for us. And you pull, like, what spoke to you? Where would you like to start? What's really resonant? What do you feel in your body? But I love this work of coaching from this place of alignment, and seeking our true and authentic self. It's a process, and it's a beautiful, and it's a messy process, and it's all the things, but it's also so juicy. And, you all know that I do coaching, and Zeenath does as well. And so, if there's interest in reaching out to you, will you share your website, and if you're on Instagram or any social media?
Sure. Yes. My website is energylifecoaching.com. And my offerings are meditation, yoga, breath work, and the coaching, of course. I was like, I'm
Yeah.
missing something. The coaching,
Yeah, exactly.
helping women, and whoever needs help
Mm-hmm.
with this discussion, continuing on the discussion and exploring who you truly are, and how that can help your everybody else in your life.
Yeah, your life just gets richer and fuller. And I can see, I've been on the path for, right, almost on this path that we've been talking about today. I'd say, like, the beginning, about, almost 4 years ago. Yeah, I've been a seeker of many other things for, a long time now, probably 15 years or so. But I think my real transformation is when I started to engage in these kind of conversations. And that being said, I see places in myself that are still unhealed, and at the same time are healing every day. And I get to know myself, deeper and more, and tune into what I need, and use that as my guidance. And it's just, I can't speak, more highly of the process.
I
Mm-hmm.
think it's amazing how
Yeah.
we can continue on the path and still learn so much. There's still so
Yeah,
much for us to learn. Oh, we have another 15
absolutely.
minutes, right?
Yeah, I love it. So, Zena, thank you so much for being with Mystical Sisterhood today. And thanks to the listeners for being with us again. Let us know what you thought of the conversation, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical Sisterhood. To learn more about my one-on-one coaching programs or join the Mystical Sisterhood membership, visit MaureenSpielman.com or mysticalsisterhood.com. Thanks so much. I'll see you in the next episode.